Hey everybody, this is Andrea Jenson from the Cash Flow CFO, and you're listening to the Cash Flow CFO Podcast, the show that explores the financial side of running a business for people who want to maximize profitability and scale with confidence. If you want to make smart financial decisions based on data and put more of your hard-earned profits into your pocket, this is the podcast for you. This episode of the Cash Flow CFO podcast is brought to you by the Cash Flow CFO. Did you know that on average, business owners have up to 84% of their personal net worth tied up in their business? Our virtual CPAs and CFOs, as well as accounting and bookkeeping experts, empower business owners just like you to make big leaps that help them maximize profitability and scale with confidence. Visit thecashflowcfo.com for more information, and thank you for listening. Our guest for today is a return conversation with the wonderful Dennis Carlson. Dennis is an experienced business owner, entrepreneur, and sales and marketing executive in the employee benefits industry. In 2009, after building the employee benefits sales and service division for a commercial insurance agency, Dennis founded Bespoke Benefits, an employee benefits and executive consultancy, which was acquired in 2017. Currently, Dennis leads the executive benefits practice in the Western U.S. for Marsh McLennan Agency. In addition to helping employers create the best benefits packages to attract and retain top talent, he advises on executive benefits solutions to meet the needs of small and mid-sized business owners. Over the span of his career, Dennis has served as a sales and marketing leader, advisor, and subject matter expert to insurance carriers, agencies, nonprofits, and tech companies, including some big names like Kaiser Permanente, Assurant Employee Benefits, Blue Shield of California, California Choice, and many more. Dennis is also a proud past president of the Sacramento chapter of the National Association of Benefits and Insurance Professionals. And when he's not advising clients on employee and executive benefits, you can find him on a small mountain stream, fly rod in hand, protecting the resident trout. Love it. Welcome to the show, Dennis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back, Andrea. Appreciate it.
Yes. There's not very many people get a repeat visit on the podcast, but our conversation was so great last time that I really wanted to bring you back on and continue that conversation, because one of the things that you say, and is so very, very true, is that not very often does the finance team get involved in a benefits conversation and making the choice of what kind of benefits a company is going to roll out. And I think that's a huge misstep, because finance has, they're creating the budget for all of these different line items in the company, and they really can bring some brain power to the conversation that maybe the business owner and HR, who typically are in these conversations, aren't really thinking about. And Dennis, what I love about our conversation today and what you're going to talk about is there's some alternative funding ways that I think a lot of business owners don't even know are available to them. And ultimately, we all want to, attract top talent. We want to retain that top talent. And a big factor in that is being competitive in the benefits that you're offering. So with that, I hope I teed you up properly to kind of dive in and lead us through thinking about this in a different way and kind of expanding our thought and awareness around what's possible.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that setup. Yeah, that was perfect. So you're absolutely right. Whether you're a CFO or just a financial professional at a small to medium-sized business, quite often you're kind of left out, maybe voluntarily left out because you don't want to talk about it, but left out of the employee benefits conversation. Usually that's relegated to human resources or maybe to the office manager or the folks kind of that handle payroll and that report up to you, but you maybe are just looking at the numbers and you're kind of given options every year of, hey, we could accept this rate increase or we could decrease benefits and bring rates down to this level. But more and more we're seeing finance really getting involved in this conversation even down market. When I say down market, I mean those smaller employers. Used to be, certainly companies with 250, 500, 1,000 employees. Finance does get involved in those conversations. They know they have probably more options than small businesses do. But we're seeing a real uptick in finance saying, wait a second, we're getting double-digit % increases every year on our healthcare. It's the second largest expense for our company after payroll, a lot of times, maybe second or third, depending on the type of business. Do we really have no control over this? Do we really just have to accept 10% increases, 12%, 15% increases? And the answer is maybe not. If you're a micro employer, and I'm say micro employer, less than 10 employees, your options are fairly limited to kind of the off-the-shelf health insurance programs that are offered by all the major insurance companies. And you can mitigate costs by maybe just a reduction in benefits or, tweaking things here and there, raising deductibles. But as you just get a few more employees on the plan and really start thinking about how you can start to control costs and what you do have control over, I'll kind of lay out the spectrum of financing options as kind of taking a step back first, and then I'll kind of focus in on specific to the employers, maybe less than 50 employees. But when we talk about that spectrum of financing options, on one end of the spectrum, we have fully insured plans. Those are the off-the-shelf plans that you and I are all used to. Most people are used to from like Anthem Blue Cross out here in the West, Kaiser Permanente, United Healthcare, one of the largest health insurers in the country. So any of the big brand name health insurance companies that you're used to would be a fully insured plan. That means that every month you pay a premium for your healthcare, whether it's paid for you by you or by your employer. You're paying that premium every single month, and claims are paid out from that insurance company when you go to the doctor, when you have a surgery, whatever. We're all used to that, right? It's very, very common. I mean, we might have deductibles, we might have copays that we pay, out of our pocket. But for those large expenses, we know everything's going to be covered at whatever level the insurance plan that we have is. That's a fully insured plan. My premium stays the same every month, at least for a year, and then it goes up the next year, but then it stays the same again. On the far other end of the spectrum, we have fully self-insured. So for the larger employers, they actually opt out of this program altogether. The largest employers and we're talking, thousands of employees and tens of thousands of employees, they opt for a fully self-insured program. Now they may see the exact same doctors that you and I see, go to the same hospitals, take the same prescription drugs. But what they do is they finance their own healthcare. So those large employers are actually the ones paying out all the claims themselves. So the claim comes in and it's adjudicated, but instead of paying premium to an insurance company every month, the employer themselves pay out those claims. So that's on that far end of the spectrum, fully insured. There's a lot right in the middle there that we can actually talk about for small and mid-sized employers. And I won't get into every single thing along that spectrum, but imagine between fully insured program and fully self-insured program. Imagine there are probably anywhere from 4 to 7 kind of alternative mechanisms within that for employers. So one of the things I like to talk to small businesses about is, first of all, a lot of them have already started to look at like really high deductible health plans. Maybe they started off with, back in the day, they had a $250 deductible or no deductible. If an employee goes to the hospital, they don't pay anything, or maybe they pay $250. Those days are pretty much gone in terms of where employers have moved to. They've moved to maybe $1,000 deductible or $1,500 deductible. But some employers have always kind of shied away from those really high deductible plans where it might be a $5,000 or $10,000 deductible for their employees, because they're like, well, that's not going to feel like insurance for my employees. If I go from a $500 deductible, hospital deductible, to a $5,000 hospital deductible, my employees are going to leave. They're going to say, this isn't insurance. This isn't helpful to us at all. But one of the things you can do is take a cue from these large employers that actually manage all their own healthcare and say, well, we don't have to just leave it at that. If we as an employer decide to put in one of these high deductible health plans, where now our employees are technically responsible for a larger share of their actual healthcare costs. What we can do is we can actually build a funding mechanism underneath that. Because I can tell you what, when you look at the rate increases from all the insurance companies that we see year after year, and you've got nonstop, like almost over a decade of double-digit percent increases. So we're paying, in a lot of cases, well over 100% more than we were paying a decade ago for healthcare. And that hasn't tracked with the rest of wages, and nothing else has beat out the inflation of healthcare. Well, if you look at the profits for the companies that are providing you with this healthcare, and these are all my partner, I work with all these companies, right, as a broker. But if you look at the profits, you can just, look it up, go to a stock portfolio and put in all the major health insurance companies and track that against the S&P 500. And you'll see that every one of those health insurance companies has done better than the S&P 500 since 2009. They've all done better since that time.
Crazy.
Yeah. So you think about all that extra premium you're paying, where's it going? Right. And so this is the simple math that large employers get to do pretty easily, because they can spread their risk across tons of employees. A little employer can't go fully self-insured, but what they can do is say, instead of paying all this additional premium for this low deductible health plan, I'm going to go to a higher deductible health plan. And then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually fund myself as the employer underneath that deductible. So I'm going to make my employees still feel like they have a $250 deductible plan, but all those claims in between $250 and let's say $5,000 or $7,000, as the employer, I'm going to pay those. And what I'm going to do is save a lot in monthly insurance premium, right? Because I went from a fairly low deductible plan to a high deductible plan. Well, my monthly costs have come down now. And now when I look at those claims, and I could have, by the way, this strategy is not a strategy that's like a quick fix and you're going to necessarily save all your money the first year and then see savings. But it's in a 3 to 5 year strategy, you'll most likely have quite a bit of savings. You're likely, based on just the law of numbers, that you're going to see savings over that time by bringing that premium down and then trying your best to manage the risk in between. And you talk to employers about this, and one of the first things that I'll hear is like, well, I don't want to have to pay claims. Like, so now what? I'm getting a claim and I have to decide how much to pay, and is it a legit claim? So there's a couple of components to doing this. One is that high deductible health plan. Another component is a third party administrator. So there's a lot of third party administrators out there. We have certain ones that maybe we recommend over others, but they're honestly, a lot of times it's regional or depending on what we're trying to accomplish with the plan. So there's not a single one that I would say this is the third party administrator go to, but it's a really, really important component of this. You hire a third party administrator, and then what most employees end up with is a debit card to pay out those claims from that. We as the employer have decided you are still going to be responsible for the first $250 of any hospitalizations, perhaps, let's just say. And we're going to cover then after $250, we're going to pay 80% of the cost share up to the next $5,000 in hospital expenses. That's kind of a common plan structure maybe that you'd already have in typical fully insured plan. That's what you're trying to do, is mirror what we already had. So we put in this plan that says, well, we're going to pay this, and then the employees pay it maybe using like a debit card. So when they go, this is the hassle factor. And this is where a lot of employers will also say, well, okay, so now I've gotten out of the claims business because we've hired a third party administrator to do this. And we're just paying them a small monthly fee per person, basically, to manage those claims. So I got me out of that business. But now what do my employees have to do? Well, your employees are going to probably this means they're going to carry a separate card, a debit card that's just for healthcare. They're going to use they can use it for copays if you allow for that. They can use it for prescription drugs if you allow for that. And they can use it for hospitalization if you allow for that. But the third party administrator helps you design the plan, right? In consultation with a consultant like myself, helps you design the plan and then administers that plan. And for the employees, it really gets about as close as you can to the feeling of a fully insured plan, but without all the cost. And so we call that partially self-funded or partially self-insured, where we still have a fully insured program backing it up. So I, as an employer and as an employee, know if I have more than $5,000, $10,000 in claims, whatever the limit is, the insurance company is going to take over from there. The large employers do the same thing, but they buy something called stop loss insurance. So instead of a $5,000 deductible or $10,000, they're maybe looking at $100,000 or $1 million in claims before the reinsurance or the stop loss insurance kicks in and starts paying those large claims. So all we're really doing is taking a tried and true concept that's already been working up market on these large enterprise employers, and we've seen it come down market. And like I said, I'm giving an example for a small employer, but as you go and you start talking about larger and larger employers, you can do more and more of these kind of creative strategies because you just have more options available to you. And you have more people to spread that risk across. So you can take a little bit more risk as an employer the larger you get, because you know that if you have 100 employees, the chance of you actually hitting claims on all of them is really tiny. And you're probably, you can actually start to use kind of actuarial tables and things to see like, okay, what are our claims going to look like? I'm going to stop there and maybe have some questions.
Start scaling with confidence today. The Cash Flow CFO is a full-service accounting and fractional CFO firm. So it goes without saying that our financial experts are phenomenal at number crunching. But more than that, they are expert communicators who will connect all those complicated financial dots in a way that just makes sense. We don't wait in the wings and check in every so often either. With our boutique approach, we position ourselves front and center, watching over every dollar that comes in and out of your business as if it was our own. So if your business is making money and you're ready to take it to the next level, but you're not sure you completely understand your numbers, and you're looking for that trusted guide to help you build a roadmap to reach your financial goals, it sounds like we would be a great fit. Visit thecashflowcfo.com and let's get started empowering you to build and scale your business the way you want to today.
That's tremendous. And of course, my brain is like, yep, I'm tracking all along, but we've got all different types of listeners and viewers. So I'd love to kind of break that down a little bit. So let's just say the $5,000 is the high deductible. That means that they still have an insurance company. Anything over the 5,000, it kicks into the insurance company. But anything under that, that's kind of where they have to weigh the difference of, I'm going to get a lower premium because I have a high deductible plan. And I don't think I'm going to end up paying out more in one calendar year than what I was saving.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is the analysis we typically would do when we bring this to an employer is we do a complete analysis. We do an expected scenario. And again, it's hard with really tiny groups. Well, it can be easy with really tiny employers if we know everyone's healthy. We know that, hey, yes, there are 4 people who work here and we know everything about them because they're all family. Then you can have that conversation and say, hey, nobody's going to the doctor. Why are you paying all this in insurance premium? Let's put in a high deductible plan and, we can pay it out from there. And everyone's business, right? You go a little larger employer, it's not family anymore. It's not close friends that you work with. You've got 10 people even in the office. You don't want to know what's going on with everyone necessarily. Mm-hmm. So that's where you start to see this really work. But what you do in those situations is we come in and say, okay, here's our expected claims. You've got 10 people. Here are their ages. Maybe we do know a couple of things. Here's the expected claims. Here's your worst case scenario. And here's your best case scenario. Now, best case scenario is almost never like 0 claims because that means nobody went to the doctor, nobody had any prescriptions, but you give them that range. And a lot of times what's so great is that worst case scenario is about the same as if they had just paid the premium. Mm-hmm. So the nice thing is it's not typically like we're putting this in and you're taking some big risk. We're basically typically what we try to do is make that worst case scenario and this is all in plan design, how we design the plan, but make that match what you're currently paying today so that in a worst case scenario, you're paying the same. Mm-hmm. In a most likely scenario, you're getting some savings. And in a better than most likely scenario, you're getting a lot of savings.
Yeah. So from an employee perspective, how does this stack up as far as like having more competitive benefits or a richer plan or things like that?
Well, it does a couple of things. So and I'll give you the pros and the cons, right? On the pro side, so you said how it stacks up against being competitive. Well, the nice thing is now you, as the employer, you get to design that plan underneath so you have the health insurance plan that has that high deductible, but you as the employer get to custom design what you want underneath. So you could say, well, we want to have a 100% plan paid, or we want to have a $500 deductible and then everything pays at 100%. You can get really creative where you can't do that with off the shelf health insurance plans that you just buy and pay premium for. They're set. There are a whole bunch of different ones, but you can't say, well, I want to raise the deductible to this and have the co-insurance, the percentage that I cost share with be this, and I want my deductible to this out of pocket. You can't mix and match whatever you want. They have any insurance company will have a number of plans to choose from, but they are off the shelf the way they come. You can't change them. Mm-hmm. With this type of scenario, you're putting in that high deductible and then you're completely custom designing exactly what you want underneath. So from a competitive standpoint, if you're coming from a plan that your employees were at least happy with the benefits that you had, you could just match the plan design identically. You can say, we're going to match that plan design, but now we're just going to keep the savings. So that's a pro. You can really manipulate it however you want. And if you're saying, hey, we need to beef up our benefits, but we can't spend more, this is one way to think about beefing up those benefits, because we're going to design a richer plan, but we're going to have some savings because we have the high deductible, and we're going to see if we can, provide a richer benefit and still keep those claims down. On the con side, from an employee experience, the thing I mentioned about having that extra debit card, I don't ever want employers to take that lightly.
Right.
It's hard enough to remember your medical ID card when you show up at the doctor. In most cases now they can look us up by our social, right, and our date of birth, or we have it digitally on our phone. And the debit card, can kind of be the same thing. You can pay claims after the fact, like you can be billed. So there are ways around it. But if there's one thing that employees have problems with, it's either remembering to use the debit card or remembering how to file a claim, because, thankfully we're talking about somebody who maybe doesn't use the plan a lot. So it's like we did the whole open enrollment. We did a great communication. We told them all exactly how to use the card and what to expect at the physician. 9 months go by before they ever go to the doctor, and they have forgotten everything. So it's kind of a constant. Now after about that second year, most employees have at least hopefully had some experience with it. You've gotten some of the kinks out, but I try to go in myself as an advisor, but also for the employer to be real clear-eyed that this is not you. Now you're becoming a little tiny insurance company. And so you get all the things that go along with that. Even though the third-party administrator is paying the claims and you're not adjudicating claims necessarily, but you are probably getting a little more involved, and your broker certainly should be more involved. When that employee comes and says, hey, my claim wasn't paid as it was expected. Well, you're not going to the insurance company because the insurance company never even saw the claim because it was underneath the deductible, or they only applied it to the deductible. They didn't deny it or anything. They just didn't pay it because it's under the deductible. So now guess what? Now you're dealing with a third-party administrator. But again, a consultant that understands, and I'm not the only one who understands this, consultants who understand how to navigate these programs should be your advocate for those types of scenarios. But that's really when you say, like, how does it allow them to be more competitive? Well, it allows them to be more competitive by custom designing a plan. But it comes, of course, it doesn't come with no strings attached. It comes with a little more administrative headache. And I'm just going to call it what it is because it's health insurance. Like, nobody wants to deal with it, right? It can be a bit of a headache, but that's where the cost savings typically outweighs. When we see employers go this direction, they know in the end, like, oh yeah, this is more work than just having a fully insured plan, but probably would never go back because the savings can be so advantageous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine as your team gets bigger, right, the savings also grow proportionately. Yeah, that's great. I wonder, and this might be switching the topic a little bit, but still in the conversation there, I've been noticing a lot more retailers are now accepting FSA. Mm-hmm. Has something changed in the insurance world that has now opened up a lot more retailers to deem their products or services eligible under the FSA program?
So more just, I would say a big part of it is the technology. So just the ability to use cards at more places, and the kind of the realization that, hey, this is a market of people who have money in their flexible spending account. That's use it or lose it.
Right.
So advertising that we accept FSA dollars, it's really probably not any more stores that are accepting it that weren't, didn't before, but there's just way more debit cards out there now and way more easy ways to pay using FSA dollars. Not so much that the list is like dramatically expanded or things like that, so much as it is just the ease of the transaction. And I think a market that's capitalizing on something that a lot of people end up forgetting they have at the end of the year. And as you know, like FSA, true, like unlike it, like a HSA or what we're like the whole thing that I was just talking about falls under what's called a health reimbursement arrangement. And HRA is actually what I just spent all those minutes describing is an HRA. Those aren't use it or lose it dollars. HSA is not use it or lose it, but FSA is, if you don't use that money by the end of the year, guess who gets it? Your employer. So if I put $3,000 or $2,000 in my flexible spending account and then I forget about it at the end of the year, and I forget about for the grace period, the employer gets it. So these retailers are capitalizing on the fact that a lot of people at the end of the year are like, oh shoot, I better buy some stuff with my FSA dollars.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So what are some of the other components of a plan that you would recommend business owners look into offering?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, first of all, you compare everything to the fully insured market. So you should, working with your broker should be looking at the fully insured market every year. Now, I would argue start looking at different networks. All the insurance companies, and, I'm coming from California where we actually have a pretty competitive insurance landscape. But depending on what state you're in, obviously insurance is driven by state. Depending on what state you're in, I would start looking at different networks of physicians. And most of the insurance companies now offer, like, sometimes you call them narrow network or select network type plans, where it is a smaller network, but that's also a way to save money. And that's changed a lot. Just over the past number of years, there are different networks. And so depending on and it's all really geographically based. But if you have employees in a very distinct area, and most of them, you don't have a real big remote workforce, you should really be looking at those networks right in your area and seeing if there are savings just from moving. Maybe you're on one of the big insurance companies, but they have a plan that's called like Select or, Premier, something that says it's like a more exclusive network. That usually means cheaper. It's a cheaper plan for all the same benefits, but just fewer physicians, but it might work for you. So that's one thing to look at. Another component to look at is when you're going for that high deductible option, if you're starting to really like explore that, really look at your third-party administrator and then also look at your prescription drug plan options, because the prescription drugs are a huge driver of cost in your plans. And so especially as you get to a little bit larger employer where you have a little more flexibility with that plan design, really understanding your prescription drug program. And if you're a small employer, probably you can't go carve out a prescription drug, the way that large employers can carve out prescription drug plans and transparently see everything just like they can on their health plan, which is pretty cool. Small employers, we're not anywhere near that yet, but there are things you can do where you can incentivize generics, for example, or get people to use prescription drug discount cards. So really, once you start managing your own healthcare as an employer, you really start to then look at, wait, how can we drive utilization in a way that keeps our employees healthy, make sure they get the care they need, but is the most cost effective within those guardrails of, employee health and wellness. How do we drive that? And when you're on a fully insured plan, you don't even think about that because your premiums are your premiums. Doesn't matter how healthy or sick your population is, you're paying the premiums because you're pooled in with all these other small employers who are getting rate increases every year. But now, with what I'm describing, you're controlling your own destiny for at least part of your healthcare dollars. And so you do start to look at employee wellness programs and some of those solutions that might drive costs down so that people aren't using the emergency room when they should be using like the clinic, right? And you're doing communication around those things. And again, these are things like talk to your broker, talk to your consultant. They should be helping you with that communication strategy. But I would say that's probably at least half the game, is that employees understand how to utilize the plan, and what are some of those drivers that the employer is now incenting employees to make different decisions about how they utilize their healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think too, it's like, it is one of those components that a lot of employers don't communicate as frequently as they have the opportunity to highlight, hey, this is something that we're paying for you. This is a benefit. Here's, like, you said, here's how to use it. Here's what what's included in it. Here's your options. It's a win-win if, I don't know this for a fact, but, maybe they go off and they get a different type of, like you said, you pointed to the care, maybe there's a different type of prescription, all these little things that, lower their cost and the company's cost. And it's just a little bit of the missing piece of education around the different options and things like that.
Yeah. And that's why, again, back to kind of the finance audience, that's why bringing finance into this conversation. I mean, if you can't get, whether you have a full-time HR person or not, if you can't get HR necessarily to kind of drive some of that communication, if finance knows, hey, this actually might lower costs in the end, it actually might save us money, then that's another level that can be pulled in an organization to say, this isn't, sure, it's about employee experience, but that's not all it's about. And I feel like so often that's where we begin and end the conversation around employee benefits, is around employee experience, engagement. And we kind of pretend that, like, well, we have this much for a budget, so let's go and see what we can get. And we don't understand that we actually have some internal levers we can pull to bring those costs down. And that's what I'm just trying to do. I mean, part of what I think is important is bringing HR and finance together in this conversation so that they're both on the same page and both like fighting for the same outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the whole time you're talking, right, as a fractional CFO, my brain is like, you're hitting budget, you're going over budget. When these rate increases comes, we have to decrease the budget somewhere else. Who's going to take the haircut to pay for this? And it really makes finance look like the bad guy, because they've got a budget to balance and stay within, and that's their role in the company. And I would imagine the first thing out of their mind is like, we just need to decrease our benefits. And then you have everybody else going, no, we need better benefits to attract and retain, so it's this tug of war between them.
And this is where, because you're right, that's what always happens. Exactly what you just described. Every small business I've worked with over the years, that's kind of how the conversation seems to be going. And what I recommend to that person, the fractional CFO, the finance person, the person who got thrown the CFO hat, but really, didn't even ask for it, insert yourself into the actual benefits conversation, not just the dollars, not just because otherwise it does become, well, you just got to lower costs. And for better or worse, I mean, HR's way to lower costs is usually just to get worse benefits. We're going to fine. We'll have to put in a worse plan. But if finance can come in with armed with a little bit of knowledge, finance can have that conversation, have it with the broker, pull HR and finance into the conversation with the broker, and let finance start asking some of these questions like, hey, are there other things we can do, other creative solutions where we can actually lower these costs without having to just decrease benefits? And honestly, if you have more than 10 employees and a broker is saying, no, you have zero other options, just get a second opinion. Call it, like, it's not hard to find us. Brokers are easy to find. We're probably getting cold calls from them every day that you're hanging up on. Just take the call from the next one and just say, hey, talk to me about some alternative. Any broker should be able to, just that terminology, alternative funding mechanisms. Doesn't mean they're right for you. Doesn't mean you should like accept them, but you should at least be looking at them. And that's finance inserting in. HR will almost never of their own accord go looking, because it does create a little more administration for them. And it's not going to be the perfect employee experience. And that's what HR wants, right? They're like, I don't want to have to do as much work. If I was HR, I'd be saying the same thing. I don't want to do as much work, and I want to keep my employees happy. I want as few complaints as possible. Well, any plan changes are going to be disruptive, no matter what. Even when we improve plans, if we switch insurance companies or something like that, there's disruption. But at least do yourself the favor to have looked at this, because the alternative is to go to just that high deductible health plan and be like, well, sorry, now you have a $2,000 deductible. And everyone's mad, and you didn't do anything about it because we didn't know, or we didn't understand that we had options because no one told us.
Right. Yeah. No, it's very true. Very true. I love it. What a great topic. And I'm so glad that you were able to come back on and we could continue the conversation. If you guys missed that first podcast interview, go back and check it out. We'll link it in the show notes, but this is something that every employer has to figure out and has to find the right solution for their company. Because labor, and especially skilled, the professional services, it's getting more and more competitive, and you've got to find different ways that you can elevate your company, above the rest and stand out to the job market. So this is a great way to do it. And, Dennis has just walked us through some ways that, you can take and still give a very good competitive benefits package, but maybe, carve out a little bit here and there and do things differently so that you can afford to take it up a notch, and still stay within your budget. So
that's right.
Yeah. Well, Dennis, thank you so much. This has been a very great conversation. I know I personally learned a lot, and it's ever changing, right? The whole dynamics of benefits and things like that. So, for the business owners that are listening or watching, find somewhere, and maybe that's a good question for you too, Dennis. What can they plug into, whether it's like a newsletter or an organization that they can kind of just hear what's happening enough to ask the right questions, or stay engaged in this.
Sure. Yeah. The first plug is find me on LinkedIn. I post about this on LinkedIn, and I reshare other folks that I follow. But if I'm on a podcast right now. I have done podcasts in previous life. A couple of podcasts that I recommend, that are a little nerdier in this, but if you're kind of like into the finance side of this and like, this sounds interesting. There's one called Self-Funded with Spencer. I'm not unaffiliated with it, but he does a great podcast that talks all about this is his main lane, is this kind of self-funding spectrum, mostly about larger employers, but it's really an accessible, approachable take on it. And the other one that I've really gotten into is called Relentless Health Value. They talk a lot about kind of the prescription drug angle and just how to drive more value out of your employer-based healthcare. Sometimes they aren't super happy with the broker community, the community that I'm part of, but I also know that there's some bad actors out there that, sometimes give us a bad reputation. So those are the two that I kind of recommend, if you're going to check out. And that's, podcasts are my way of typically deep diving into new ideas.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that, because you can do it with the net time, no extra time, right? You can hit something on your commute or while you're doing the dishes. I did that today. I'm listening to an audiobook, and I was washing dishes and had it playing, and I was like, this is great. Made the time go by much faster.
That's right.
So we'll link those in the show notes as well. And Dennis, thank you again for such a great conversation. And it's always a pleasure to spend some time with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me back.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and review, and we'll catch you on the next episode. If you're looking for more content or resources in the meantime, check out our website for information, blogs, and our I've Got a Spreadsheet for That series. That's thecashflowcfo.com. Again, thecashflowcfo.com. We can't wait to hear from you.